All right, welcome back, everybody. So in the last video, we set up two different Firebase projects. And in possibly the next video, but somewhere in the near future, we're going to actually start archiving our builds to the App Store. When we go to archive the builds, we're going to have to decide which version we want to put to the App Store. We're going to archive both the production and the development version. So the production version will be the version that goes to App Store Connect, and then we actually submit it into the App Store. The development version will be a version that we push to App Store Connect, but then we only distribute it to our internal team. So this will be used for yourself and other engineers, but also everyone that is not working in Xcode that is related to the product development. So your product managers, your UI designers, we'll ship the development build to all of them. We're not going to ship the mock build because that's primarily just for you and the other engineers, but you could send that out as well. But when we send the development build, the users, so your product designer, your product manager, they're going to get this app and they're obviously not going to have access to the console. So oftentimes when we ship it a development build, some other teams might call it like an admin build. We want to add some extra screens into the build so that our product manager or designer can also help debug. Because oftentimes when you ship this build internally, they're going to have feedback and you're going to want to know some information on maybe what their user ID is, what A/B tests they're in, and maybe some device information. So later we're going to set up analytics so you can see the analytics directly, but it also really helps to just add some extra screens in the app for the development build. So for example, we can see in the console, the user ID is this, but if I was just shipping this build, this user using this app has no idea what their actual user ID is. So in this video, we're going to add an extra screen in here only for our development build, where the user can actually see some extra additional information about their current session. Let's jump into the Explore view. And I'll get the canvas working here. We'll use the canvas for the rest of this video. Let's go down to the navigation title section, and let's also add a toolbar. And we'll add a toolbar item. Let's use the placement with the top leading, and we're going to put a quick little button in here. I'll do a quick H stack on the text. We'll put a text that says dev, and then maybe I'll do an emoji, control command space bar, maybe the quiet little shh, because it's the dev settings. Maybe we add our badge button UI here, and then we'll do dot as button, any button. And let's do the press. And so now we should be able to click the little dev button in the top left corner. We actually don't need an H stack, so let's go ahead and just put the text here. Now I only want to show this if this is the actual dev build. So let's come up here and let's create a private var and say show dev settings button of type bool, set it equal to true. And then we'll come down to our button and we'll say if show dev settings button, and then we'll put our button in here. Now I'm going to use our new compiler flags. So we'll do a pound or a hashtag if dev. I'll do or if mock. So if it's the dev build or the mock build, then we'll say return true. And then we'll say else and then end if. And then here we'll return false. So right now we're in the development scheme. Most of the time we should just stay on the mock scheme while we're building, but either of these will have our dev button. If we switch to the production scheme, you're going to find that your preview breaks. So I'll do it real quick. That's because when we set up the scheme for the production scheme, we use the release configuration, and the release configuration has extra settings to optimize that build. And so because of those settings, that build it no longer can just run in the SwiftUI preview just based on how the preview gets created. So that's actually this error is actually now on purpose because our production environment is not a preview environment. But most of the time we're going to stay here on the mock. But what we can do actually real quick is let's take their production build and build that to a simulator. And we should be able to see that our dev settings is not appearing in the production build. Cool, so this loads up. We don't see the dev settings button. I'm going to run the dev build real quick and just run it to a simulator just to prove that both are working. And in our dev build, of course, we have our dev button. All right, let's keep building this now. So I'll come back into here and I'll keep our mock scheme running while we go ahead and build the previews. Let's create up here another state at state private var. We'll say show dev settings of type of bool. We'll set it equal to false. And down in our code, let's put a sheet. We'll add it maybe down here. A sheet is presented, show dev settings. And then we'll put text that says dev settings. And from our button, we'll say show dev settings equals to true. Let's clean up this code quick. I'm going to cut it. And down here, I'll do a private var dev settings button of type some view. And then I'll do a private func on dev settings pressed. And we'll take this code, put it down here, and then call this action. Again, the UI layer, the business logic layer. And let's take our dev settings button, put it up here in our code. Now, if I click it in the preview, hopefully the button does actually display. Let's reload the canvas real quick. Let's click it and then dev settings pops up. Perfect. Let's go ahead and build dev settings now. So we're going to go to our core section and we have all of our screens. Let's go ahead and right click, create one more new folder. And this I will call dev settings. I don't want to call it settings because we already have the app settings. So dev settings here. Let's right click and create a new file from template, a Swift UI view called the dev settings view. And let's click create. Now we're going to build on this as we continue the course, but let's get some default stuff set up. Firstly, we know when we go to this screen, we're going to pop open a new sheet. Because it's a new sheet, it's a new environment in Swift UI, which means we are no longer in a navigation stack. So I can now add a new navigation stack in here. Let's put a list so we get some basic UI, and I'll just do some text that says hi. Let's pull in our at environment, and we'll use the \dismiss, private var dismiss, and we'll add a .toolbar with a button. Let's do a toolbar item. Top leading, and we'll add in a button. Let's do a image with a system name xmark. Give it a font of maybe title 2, and we'll do any button. Let's do the default any button, and the action will be dismissed. Let's put a nav title of dev settings. Again, I'll put an emoji on here. Let's do something fun, like maybe this one. The shocker image, dev settings, so cool. All right, title 2, font weight, black. Get a real thick X mark on here. Now we're going to add to this as we go through the course. We're going to add a bunch of buttons in here and things for the developers and the team to actually use. But the first thing that comes to my mind that I want to put in here is the user's ID. So we're going to get that from the auth manager. Let's pull in the environment. We'll do the auth manager, auth manager.self, private var auth manager. Inside the auth manager, we already have the user's auth. So inside the user's auth info, we should be able to get all of this information. So maybe in our code here, we create a section. Let's give it a header and some content. The header for the section will be the auth info. And then for the section, let's put a quick little H stack text that says user ID. And then let's add in maybe a little spacer. We'll give this a minimum length of 4, so it's at least 4 pixels. And then let's put in the user's ID. So we'll put in the auth manager auth.uid. Otherwise, let's do no UID. The preview is breaking because we need to bring in our preview environment. Hopefully, we can now see the user's ID on the screen. Cool. Now, I want to also pull in all the other information from that user auth info. So we go back to the user auth info. We also have email, is anonymous, creation date, last sign in. I want to display all of that on the screen. So rather than accessing each of these individually, let's just create a dictionary that holds all of this data for this object. So down here, I'm going to create a variable here called event parameters. that is a dictionary of type string any, and we'll open the brackets. And then in here now, we're going to return basically all of this information. Now a dictionary takes keys and values. So we know the values are going to be this: strings, booleans, dates. But what should we use as the keys? Now we could come in here and just return a dictionary that says like user ID of colon, and then we'll pass in the UID. I could type all these out, but this looks pretty familiar. In all of our other data models, such as the user model, we created custom coding keys in which we already have keys for each of the values in it. So even though we're not using this as codable, let's go ahead and conform to codable for the user auth info, and let's add in our custom coding keys. So if we ever actually decide to write this to Firebase, we already have these keys set up, but we can also now use these keys directly. So here I'll put is anonymous. Here I'll put creation date, and then here I'll put last sign in date. Let's give this a raw value of string, and now I should be able to call coding keys .uid.raw value. And I'll copy this and put one for each of these. So we have the email, which is the email. We have the is anonymous, creation date, that's creation date. And then we'll do one more for the last sign in date. We're getting warnings here because email is optional, and so are these dates. But we told the compiler that this was going to be a dictionary where the value is not optional. So we could have returned an optional, but it really doesn't make sense to return nil if these are not valid. So what I'm going to do is keep this as non-optional. Let's make this a dictionary that is string with optional values. And then let's return the dictionary and let's compact map the values. So any key and value where the value is nil will just be dropped. So this should be just the data that is valid in this dictionary. The last thing that we're going to change here is, so now we're going to have these keys, but some of these keys like email is not very unique to the user auth info. For example, if we have the user model and we add email here, if we have both the data from this model and the data from the other model in the same dictionary, in theory, if we were to do that in our code, we wouldn't be able to tell which one is coming from the user model versus the auth user info, because these keys are not that unique. They're unique, but they're not that unique. So what we're going to do here is actually just append a prefix to each of these. So I'm going to cut this. Let's add a string here, and let's call this the uauth for user authentication. And then I'll do an underscore, and we'll put in our key value here. So I'm going to copy this, and let's do that for all of these. And let's just change it out back to email is anonymous, creation date, last sign in date. So now I know that these keys are going to be unique. And when we go and update the user model later, we're going to have a different prefix for the keys coming from that one. I'm calling this event parameters because later we're going to set up analytics. And when we have analytics related to the user auth info, we're just going to send this dictionary to the analytics. So this way we don't have to retype all of these keys and values every time we trigger any kind of analytic. So this is actually just thinking ahead, because I've done this so many times, that if we have an analytic where there is both a user auth info and a user model, we don't want those keys to overlap. So this is really just saving us in the future, making sure that these are unique keys to the user auth info. Let's jump back to the dev settings view now. And now we should be able to get that entire dictionary. So here, let's say we'll call dict equals the auth manager dot auth dot, and then we should be able to access the event parameters. Now we want to loop on the event parameters. So we're going to do a for each. Now, in order to loop on something, that collection needs to have an order. Dictionaries do not have an order. So a reminder that arrays have indexes, right? Item 0, item 1, item 2, they're in a set order. Dictionaries are not in an order. So we want to now map this dictionary into an array. So right now we have it as a dictionary. Let's go ahead and map it. We'll call just map, not map values. Let's click enter here. This will be the key and the value. And let's just return it as one entity together. We'll just return the key value. So now if I hold the option and click on it, this should be an array of key value pairs. Let's do otherwise a blank array because it is optional right now. So now we should be able to loop on the array. So let's call this an array. Put this here. And we'll click enter on the closure here. Now this array is not identifiable, but there are unique keys. Let's tell it that the ID for each one is going to be the key or 0 that we pass in. I don't like using 0 here, so let's give this an actual name. So when we return, I'm going to return key of type key and value of type value. So now we can actually call .key here. And then this will be each item in. So let's put on the screen text our row here. This will be the item.key. And then we need the item.value. However, the value in the item is going to be any. So let's cast that as a string. We'll say if let value equals item.value as string. Let's go ahead and put that on the screen here. Now we should be able to put the value here. All right, so we got 2 of our values coming through. Some of the other stuff, the Booleans and the dates, are not coming through. So let's also catch all the edge cases where we're now unwrapping our any value as a string. Let's also say else if let value equals item.value as bool. Else if let value equals item.value as integer. And then let's just copy this. Else. Let's do bool, integer, double, and maybe date. And if we need to add more, we'll add more later. So let's put the text on each of these cases. And if it's a bool, we'll do the boolean.description. If it's an integer, let's wrap that in a string so that it prints out as a string. We'll do the same thing for the double. And then a date, I think we can do value.formatted and it will convert it to a string. Let's let our preview load again real quick. Let's put in an else statement and we'll just do text unknown in case there is a type that we don't know. Let's give the whole HStack a font of caption. So it's just a little smaller text. We'll give it a line limit of 1 so that everything stays on one line, and a minimum scale factor is 0.3 so that we can scale down some of this if it needs to fit onto one line, just to make it a little bit human readable. I don't really care about the user experience here because this is just going to our team. Looks a little better already. We're going to reuse this row. So let's go ahead and cut it and come down here. Let's create a private func called item row and return some view. And in here, we're going to pass in an item, which will be the same type that we have up here. So I'll copy this, paste it here. Key we know is going to be string and the value is any. And now I should be able to add a item row with the item. It's a lot of setup here, but we're going to use this for a bunch of other pieces of data going forward. So it's worth the setup time right now. Lastly, you probably noticed that every time this loads, these items are in a different order. So right now the email is at the top and the last sign in date is at the bottom. But if I reload this preview, we'll see now the last sign date is at the top, email is in the middle. And that's because dictionaries in Swift are not ordered, as we just said. So right now we're taking an unordered dictionary and we're converting it to an array. So the array is ordered, but it's going to be based on however the dictionary got unwrapped. So what we want to also do is now just take the array and sort it in order. So I'll wrap the entire array and let's just call it .sorted. And we already have a sorted by key path. Let's just do by the .key. So now every time we run this, it should automatically sort by the key alphabetically. And that looks exactly like what we wanted. I don't like the way this code looks. It's not very readable, so let's clean it up a little bit. Firstly, we can condense this whole closure because I did this so that you guys could see what we were doing. But the shorthand way to write this is we're going to say let array equals, we'll do the event parameters .map. And we'll copy this here. What we're going to return, we'll copy that. paste it in here, except rather than naming these, this will just be the $0 and the $1. Then we'll copy the sorted by key path and put it here, and then we'll do otherwise a blank array. So I should be able to now just one line this code. Even still, this is a little bit burdensome to write and maybe confusing for some other engineers. So let's go ahead and create an extension of dictionary where the key is equal to a string and the value is equal to any. We'll open the brackets. And then let's create a variable. Let's call it as alphabetical array. And this will be of type an array of key type string and value of type any. And we'll open the brackets. Let's copy our code here and we'll call cell and then paste in our mapping and our sorting. And we don't need our otherwise here. So now I can come down here and just say event parameters dot as alphabetical array, otherwise blank array. And that code looks so much cleaner than where we were about 2 minutes ago. Let's pull in our user manager. So we'll have a user manager as well. Call this the user manager. In our user manager, we also are loading up the user model, the current user model. Inside the user model, we also have more information like the color hex. Let's come down here and create event parameters. I'm going to open up a second editor, open up our user auth info. And looks like SwiftLint is yelling at us. Let's remove the spaces before the colon here. I'm going to copy the event parameters from the user auth info, and let's use them in our user model as well. Instead of uauth, let's give these a unique ID. I'll call this user underscore. So these will be the user values. And we're going to do user ID, email is the same, is anonymous is the same, creation date, creation version will go here as well. Last sign-in date, and then we have two more, did complete onboarding, as well as profile color hex. Great, that was easy. And just by the way, when I go and build apps, I usually set up like these event parameters the first time I'm setting up the data model. So I'll build the data model, I'll create the values, I'll conform to Codable, and then I'll immediately just set this up. We're doing it separately, obviously, because it would have made no sense to just like do this earlier for no reason. But if you just did this when you set it up the data model, you probably would have saved yourself a little bit of time. Anyway, let's jump back into our dev settings view now. Let's copy this and let's paste another section here. This will be our user info. Let's access the user manager dot current user dot event parameters as alphabetical array. And now just like that, we should have all of our user information on the screen as well. Perfect. We're going to do one more section right now. Let's copy and paste this. And this will be our device info. Way back earlier in this course, we imported Swiftful utilities. I will look at it down here. I have Swiftful utilities. Let's actually update this package while we're at it. I'll right click and update the package. I put out a new release a couple days ago while I was building this course. But inside the utilities was a utilities file that I showed you guys a little earlier. Let's just jump into the utilities file real quick. And it has all this different data on the current device. So this is all stuff you can just access directly, but the utilities package just has it all in one file. And then I bundled all of this up into a event parameters dictionary, just like what we just did for our other data models. You can see I prefixed it all with utility so that there's no conflict with other event parameters. So this is a lot of information that we can get that is just super annoying to have to like copy and paste into every project. But let's just access this dictionary real quick. We'll come back to our device info section. Let's go ahead and import Swiftful utilities. And then down here, we're going to say utilities.event parameters as alphabetical array. And I think it is not optional, so we can just go like that. Let's let it compile. Now we got all this extra information for the current device, which will help us debug, or should help us debug in the future. A lot of this stuff is stuff that you're probably never going to have to use, but it's free. It's there. It's like, why not just throw it into the dev settings screen? So maybe it'll come in handy one day. Who knows? Before we end this video, let's go ahead and clean this up. So we have an extension of dictionary. Let's move that into our extensions folder. Do we have dictionary? No, we don't. Let's create a new empty file called dictionary plus ext. And I will cut this, put it in our dictionary. And I think we have to import foundation as well. I will also, let's take our auth info. Let's cut it. And coming down here, I will create a private variable called auth section of type SomeView. Let's cut our user info, and we'll do a private var user section, type SomeView. One more, we'll do our device info, private var device. Let's put on the screen our auth section, our user section, and our device section. What do we call it? We should call it device section. And let's delete these extra lines. Let's let it compile and make sure it's still working. I'll create a private variable called back button view of type SomeView. Let's put our back button here. This will be the back button view. And then we have our private func on back button pressed. And we'll call dismiss here on back button pressed. Lastly, let's take our device settings view and let's go to our explore view. And where we have our sheet, let's go ahead and display a dev settings view. Let's switch to our development build. Let's Command R to build and run it to a simulator. And let's just check out what we've built. All right, so now we load up our dev app, and now we know we have our dev settings view here. If I click on it, we got a bunch of extra information. So you could imagine that if I were to send this to my product manager or my UI designer, and they ran into a bug, I can go in and now just tell them like, hey, like, can you check your dev settings? Tell me what configuration do you have? And so even for us, if we were going to go and try to debug some stuff now, I know off the bat, like my user profile color hex is this color. So now if I go through the app, I should see this color because this is the color that is saved in our backend. You could imagine that you're asking for the user ID or just some other stuff. If you're trying to debug the user authentication, whether or not the user is anonymous, you got some information here. And a lot of this stuff you don't need, obviously. Like there's a lot of stuff here, the locale currency symbol, like that's not going to really help me debug anything. But it was easy to set up. We threw it together, and then this will help us when we ship this to our team. I would rather have it in the build and not need it than need it and not have it in the build. Later in the course, we're going to add more stuff to this dev settings and actually make it interactive, where we can actually go ahead and like change configs in our actual app. But for right now, we just got this set up, and now it's probably a good time to start shipping this to our team. Let's end this video here. We're going to Option Command C. Let's call this a feature, and we'll call this dev settings. Let's go ahead and stage it. Let's commit it, push it up to GitHub, and I'll see everybody in the next video.